But first, I wanted to talk about the NetSci conference that's coming up this week. It's actually ongoing, and it's in Boston, where Jesse is. So this is the main conference for network science every year. They have NetSci. So we were interested. Actually, this group is interested in two conferences and just kind of watching what happens. There's NetSci, which is network science, and that's more kind of the science of networks. There's some applied stuff, but it's usually like a mix of social science, natural science, and technological networks. Not a lot of engineering, but like a lot of physics, like the statistical physics of networks. Not a lot of social networks in the. Yeah, there we go, Boston. That's nice. Thank you, Jesse. Um, but also, we have different types of theoretical questions that people ask with respect to social networks and biological networks, and has very much that idea of sort of universality that we see with approaches like network science, where you can take a sort of a structure and you can take the statistics and you can apply it to any kind of system. So it could be a social system, it could be a biological system. As long as you have nodes that you can define and edges that you can define. So nodes are usually units that interact, and then the edges are the interactions. You calculate those, and then there are these larger statistical properties of that structure. So this is, we've actually presented a couple times at NetSci in the past. And then, of course, there's the Graph Neural Networks Conference in December, which is more sort of computer science and focused on graph neural networks. So that's a nice conference, but they usually don't have outside submissions. They usually pick their presenters, and then people will maybe do, a lot of virtual attendance and then get the information that way. And because it's kind of a smaller field, there's a lot of repetition, and a lot of repetition at network science as well. But because it's not an infinite field, so you get a lot of diversity in network science, people working on different types of problems. So it's really kind of a nice thing to check out. So this is NetSci 2026. It's in Boston and it's happening this week. So this is the first day. And they have a Blue Sky presence. So this is their Blue Sky uh, feed. And, they'll put images from the conference in this feed. They don't have anything now because it's the first day, but they'll have like different talks and they'll take, pictures and screenshots and things and put them up here. It's always good to follow, the social media component of the conference because you can get it kind of a peek into what's going on in the sessions. So they have a program. The full program is here. The speakers. I'll talk about some of the keynote speakers here. So it looks like they have some of the classics. And what I mean by that is they have Stephen Strogatz and Duncan Watts. So these are the two people who published the Strogatz and Watts paper in 1998. And that was the first time that people would really characterize small world networks. And so they did this on some social network data, looking at the sort of the structure of a social network and thinking about how those networks are connected, how you have these hubs that connect multiple parts of the network together, and they provide these shortcuts across the network. So, if you send a message to any random person in your social group, they might get that message in 3 or 4 exchanges. I mean, any other person at random, they might get that message in 3 or 4 exchanges. If you interact directly with a hub, or in C. elegans connectome terms, what people call the rich club of neurons, you'll receive that message much quicker, maybe in 1 exchange or 2 exchanges. So those hubs, they're highly connected with all, different parts of the network, and they serve as a shortcut for message passing or for other types of communication. So this is I don't know, we're not at the 30th anniversary of that paper, but we're pretty close. Then Albert Laszlo Barabasi and Reka Albert published a paper in 1999 on a similar set of phenomena, thinking about small world networks and other types of statistical physics approaches to networks. And so this is, they were talking about scale free networks in their paper. And scale free networks that's another way to characterize the complexity of a network. In this case, that there's no characteristic length scale of a network. So that means that any node that you sample has a variety of different connectivity regimes, but it's not a random network. That's the important part. It's not random, but it's also not deterministic. And so it's, you can think about like complexity theory here for a moment and think about how people look at things that sit between order and chaos and how there are all sorts of interesting properties of those kinds of systems. So that's we're not quite at the 30th anniversary of that, but we're getting there. Then there's Young Yul An, who did a lot of work in the past with like Twitter networks and things like that at Indiana University, and then now he's at University of Virginia. Some other people here in a lot of different areas. Petra Vertes, who does stuff with neuroimaging. Some people doing things with public health and other types of, a lot of online networks are very easy to analyze. So you can, get data from things like Twitter or things like that, or well, you used to be able to do that. Or, other types of um, very large socio-technical networks. And those analytics then can be used to build these networks. Yeah, so it looks like a pretty nice slate of people. And then there's, of course, some applied math involved in network science. And this is where, they're looking at geometric learning and things like that. That's kind of this overlap with graph neural networks. So I don't think they have a lot of graph neural networks here, but they do have, I don't know if they have a formal track for it, but it's worth mentioning since this is kind of a very interesting area, and there's this natural sort of fit between network science, so it's applied in the world, and then graph neural networks, as it's sort of theorized and applied in the world. But you know, people there's this kind of disconnect between the two communities, so it'd be nice to have this sort of continuity. So I'm going to do the program overview. Today and tomorrow, June 1 and June 2, there are a lot of the satellites happening. So there's network neuroscience, which always happens. It's a very good side conference. It's pretty big. It's one of the main draws there. Um, uh, Several years ago, OpenWorm did a session at Network Neuroscience, and people were really excited about it. So um, there's network geometry. There is temporal network. So people I know that we have one person from DevoWorm, Jayadratha, who worked on temporal graphs, and we're kind of working on a paper on that, finishing it up. We're trying to get it out. So that's kind of an interesting thing, I think, for our group. There's higher order network science, algorithmic fairness in network science, which of course is a topic that, because if you're using algorithms to find communities within the network, or using them to do other things, and especially in social applications, this is an important topic. There's causal network science, um, and beyond APIs. So when you're getting this data to build networks, especially in social settings, you need to think about how you're getting it, the technical aspects, but also how to do this more efficiently. So usually people would, like back in the days when they used Twitter as a test bed for network science, they would just use an API, and there was an easy to download API, and you could use that pretty easily, but then that went away. And that put a lot of people kind of in a jam because they couldn't get data to do their research. So there are all sorts of ways to get this type of data. This one, CPIN2, critical phenomenon in networks. So critical phenomena in networks, of course, this is criticality and these other types of issues in network science and in complexity theory that's addressed in the Barbasi and Elbert paper, actually, from 1999, and has been a robust research area ever since. So CPIN2 is a second edition of an interdisciplinary forum dedicated to advancing the study of criticality and adaptive real-world network systems. So this is, I don't know if they have their program up. Let's see. Okay, yeah, they have a couple of speakers here. This first one, various types of phase transitions and complex networks. So looking at phase transitions and changes, sudden disruptive changes perhaps, or discrete changes. Another talk on phase transitions. Another one, phase transitions and homophilic social contagion. And there's one, predicting and preventing dominant agents in decentralized networks. Then there's beyond criticality, collective function near transitions in multidimensional phase space. This one, canalization drives robustness in the evolution of collective intelligence under noise. This is particularly interesting from a developmental point of view because they're using canalization. And there is this type of computational tool called a canalization function, which is something that we can talk about later. But basically, it's a function that it's kind of like a fitness function in genetic algorithms, but it uses this idea of canalization or creating developmental trajectories and kind of buffering those trajectories so that you have this tree of different options. So you start off at the top with the least differentiated system, and then you go down to the first differentiation point, and you can follow one of two trajectories away from that point. And then you keep having these branching events as you go down the tree, and you end up in a place that's highly selective and highly specialized. And that mimics the developmental process, and you can use that to mimic development. And so there's this whole set of canalization functions that we can use to simulate that. And I imagine they're using something very similar here. And then there's this early detection of critical transitions before epileptic seizures. I'm assuming this is neuroimaging. And then coordination and fragility in production networks. So that looks like an interesting. Okay, so, and then there's, of course, let's see if we can look at this temporal network session. Let's see who's there. Website. And this is temporal networks or tenant. And so this is where we're looking at temporal networks, which model systems where entities and interactions evolve over time. Unlike static networks, they capture how changing structures influence key processes by incorporating the timing, order, and duration of connections. So when we're talking in the group about the synaptic data set from Whitfleet, this is an example of something that we can talk about as the order and duration of connections. We also, when we talk about developmental networks or embryo networks, we're talking about cells that appear at different times, and cells divide. So you have two daughter cells, which are now new cells in the network or new nodes in the network, and an old cell which disappears, so that node disappears. So you have all sorts of structural changes like that. So that's what they're focused on here. And so they're interested in different applications ranging from mobility routing to disease spreading. And then, of course, the ability to get data on these things is important. And this is kind of one of the key things in network science, is being able to get the data that you need in the format that you need. So it's not just enough to have like open data. You need to have something that's amenable to that format. As we talked about in the group, of course. I think Ashu knows exactly what I'm talking about. So let's see. Let's see if there's a program. So yeah, they'll be talking about things like link prediction in temporal networks and hypergraphs, understanding temporal networks through diffusion and flows, um, role of nodes and links in spreading processes on temporal higher order networks. This one, temporal graph isomorphism and the expressivity of temporal graph neural networks. This is, of course, very much overlapping with the graph neural networks workshop that they have in December. All right, so I think that's enough about that. And then, of course, we have some more satellites. It looks like those satellites, some of them continue network neuroscience tenant. There's NetSci Ed, which is always good. This is an educational um, group that meets at Network Science every year, and they focus on education in network science. This one, Friends, Frameworks, Research, and other, I don't know what this acronym stands for. Frameworks, Research, and Applications in Complex Networks with Signed Edges. So, a very niche topic. And then they picked out this convoluted acronym. So, that's in the afternoon. Then they have Network Science and Forms AI, which it looks interesting. And then Networks and Science of Science, which is this meta science stuff. And then we have other ones, Statistical Inference for Network Science, NetBiomed, which is always interesting. I've presented at that, Networks in Biology and Medicine. TopoNets 26. TopoNets is about the topology of networks. UrbanNet, which is about urban systems. Physical networks, and ethics in network science research. Let's see, networks and science of science. I know Jesse's interested in meta science. So the speakers here, let's see if we have a schedule here. Okay. So there are papers such as Measuring the Hidden Impact of Scientific Tools and Methods. Then there's The Structure of Organized Skepticism. Academic support networks reflect doctoral experience and productivity. The emergence and evolution of semantic complexity. This is about an urban digital twin. Envisioning intelligences, discussions about collective intelligence visualizations. This is like swarm intelligence and things like that. The hidden structure of innovation networks. Do women benefit more than men from co-authoring with a prominent researcher? Status or structure, what drives changes in research performance after institutional migration? Then there's structural changing concept networks, predicts change of scientific elites. This one, massive citation count distortion due to incorrect citation association for articles in online only Springer Nature journals. This is an issue about we were talking about citation counts and things like that in the past, where there's this whole debate in meta science about like people padding their citation counts or citing papers that aren't in the literature or just making mistakes and how that impacts science. And you can do this very easily. You can build these citation networks where you can examine that. And then finally, does interdisciplinary collaboration improve funding success? Evidence from embedding-based measures. So these are all very important and timely topics. Okay, so I think that's all for that day. And they go to a Red Sox game on Tuesday. The social stuff is always interesting. So then we go to Wednesday and Thursday, and this is the meat of the conference with the keynotes and the panel talks and all of that. There's the Barbasi and Elbert keynote. There's the Munduchin keynote. Then there's some lightning talks. Then there are a couple more talks. the second lightning talk. And then the parallel sessions, of course, biological networks, network epidemics and spreading, network theory, social networks, higher order and multi-layer networks, algorithms, inference, and reconstruction. Then I think that's it for Wednesday. And then the next day, you have more keynotes, uh, more parallel sessions, including science of science, social networks, economic networks, dynamics and control network theory. This panel, which is publishing in the age of AI, which is timely, of course. More keynotes, the Watson Strogatz keynote. Then you have different parallel sessions. So they have social networks, actually, I think 4 parallel sessions where, they want to fit in all the people, but they have to split it up across time because they only have a certain amount of time in any one block. This is interesting. Network renormalization, and machine learning and AI. And then on Friday, there's the Society Awards. So the Euler Award goes to Albert Laszlo Barabasi. The Erdo Shereni Prize goes to Laurent Hébert de France, who's actually does a lot of interesting things with community, sort of community detection, and some work on open source communities, which I've seen in the past at this conference. Outstanding Service Award, Yamir Moreno, and then announcement of Network Society Fellows. So congratulations to those people. Then there were some more parallel sessions, biological networks, temporal networks, dynamics and control, economics networks, and then a few more invited talks and keynotes, and then the final set of parallel sessions on Friday afternoon.